Why Media Group? The fastest growing media group in North America.
We are taking you live to Europe. Welcome to Y Media Foreign Policy Report. Welcome to Editor's Take. We are going to take you live to Europe, where we have our Prime Minister Mark Carney. He's attending the G7 summit there. We have Shubi. He's there on ground zero reporting for Y Media. There you see the Prime Minister Mark Carney. He is addressing the media. This is live broadcast that we're showing you from Geneva in Switzerland. Prime Minister Mark Carney will be heading to the G7 summit that's going to happen in France. So we have Shubi. He will be there continuously reporting from us from France. Numaraji, why don't we start with the deal that has just happened? And Shubi was there right in front of the United Nations building where the deal will be signed. And there were protests regarding G7. That time the deal wasn't announced when he was there, but this deal has been announced. So we'll start with you. If you could just say that, and if there are any questions, I'm here to answer on Editor's Take. Please feel free to ask.
Absolutely. It's so great to do the Editor's Take, especially on this Monday, because it's a big day. We have the G7 starting, and this weekend was a big announcement that we were looking forward to, which was the signing of this peace deal. Initially, President Trump said that it was going to be signed on Sunday in Geneva, and I know that obviously didn't happen. It's been pushed forward to Friday between Iran and the United States. So Friday being June 19th. And he said that the reason it was pushed from Sunday, June 14th on his birthday to the 19th is because he said there needs to be a few things, which is pretty much they're saying that this MOU that is going to be signed, a memorandum of understanding between Iran and the United States, it covers multiple things, such as sanctions relief, such as a package for rebuilding, such as, it's going to include what's happening in Lebanon, a lot of different things that we could even discuss. Is it to the advantage of the United States or Iran more, or maybe the global community? Of course, we also saw results coming in from, what Israel had to say when it comes to the prime minister. Hasn't made a formal announcement yet, but when it comes to his finance minister, he's been out, and his national security minister, Ben-Gvir, he's also made a lot of comments about this peace deal. Now, the information about the peace deal in terms of the MOU, it hasn't been released, but it was released on Iranian state media called Mehr News, and I'll go through what some of these items are that we're looking forward to know about that will be signed on Friday. But what's significant is President Trump said that it's going to be Friday because it gives it some time to remove, I guess, the mines in the Strait of Hormuz, but meaning that on Friday, when it's signed, the Strait of Hormuz is open. We have the president's Truth Social statements when he did announce it. If you can just pull it up, I'll read it for you. It's quite significant because here he says when he made the announcement, he wrote, the deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran is now complete. This is President Trump on his Truth Social saying that, no, if you go to the first one, it says the deal with Islamic Republic of Iran is now complete. Congratulations to all. I hereby fully authorize the significant toll-free opening of the Strait of Hormuz, and simultaneously hereby authorize the immediate removal of the United States naval blockade, referring to the blockade on the Iranian ports. Ships of the world, start your engine, let the oil flow. President Donald J. Trump, massive announcement he put on his Truth Social. It's indicating, 19 hours ago, so yesterday. And this is significant because he says, it's going to be pushed over to June 19th because the mines in the Strait of Hormuz will be removed. That means the blockade from the Iranian ports will be removed, meaning Iran can now trade its oil supply, which is massive contribution to its economy, to China and elsewhere. I'm going to go through, some of the items that we've heard from Mehr News of what is in this MOU. But, I want to hear from you, Yudvirji. What do you think of this? I guess would be historic because I feel like we've been in sort of a stalemate for 3 months. First, it was, longest war that we've seen, going over to almost 40 days. That started on February 28th. And then we saw the launch of Israeli attacks and occupation in Lebanon, southern Lebanon, about 14% of their land starting early March. Then everything went into a ceasefire on, the night of April 7th. And then we saw just last few days, some escalation points happen with Iran and Israel, and then Iran and the United States. And then now we have this deal. So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, this is editor's take. So on editor's take, if I may just use one headliner and that too with two words, I will say fragile deal. Why I'm saying it's a fragile deal? Yes, both the countries, US and Iran, they have their own reasons to keep the deal afloat, and they will definitely want this deal to happen. And I think first things first, I think it's a welcome step for everyone who's watching the geopolitics scenario. Not only those who are watching, but for everyone in general. We're losing so many lives. The inflation is going higher. The oil prices are going higher. So it's not good for any common citizen of any country. So I think it's great news in case this deal is signed in Geneva, which our colleague is there right now in Europe. He was in Geneva. Now he's going to France. I think he's going to come back. So our colleague he'll definitely give us the reports from ground zero. And most of the leaders, they are welcoming this deal. I've heard our Prime Minister Mark Carney, he made a statement. We can even play the visual for you. This is directly. So let's hear what our Prime Minister Mark Carney had to say about this deal. And there are other leaders who have acknowledged this is a great step. So let's hear it out from our Prime Minister Mark Carney, what he has to say about the deal.
As the Vice President, the Qataris, the Pakistanis, but all the countries in the region. One of the things we'll work on going forward, when I say going forward from this evening, is how do we make our system, our energy system, our fertilizer systems, our other commodity systems more resilient, so the people of Ireland, the people of Canada are less affected when there is conflict, when there are shocks. And I spoke to President Macron about a few options on Friday, and under his leadership and President Trump's and others will look to make progress there. Peace deal, or the ceasefire deal, the 60-day truce. I know President Trump has worked very hard for this, as has the Vice President, the Qataris, the Pakistanis, but all the countries in the region. One of the things we'll work on going forward, when I say going forward from this evening, is how do we make our system, our energy system, our fertilizer systems, our other commodity systems more resilient, so the people of Ireland, the people of Canada are less affected when there is conflict.
Yeah, this was live. Prime Minister Mark Carney in Geneva, Switzerland. Our colleague Shubi is live there covering all the details for you from Geneva, Switzerland. This is live visuals of our Prime Minister Mark Carney making a statement on US-Iran deal. So we will carry on this update for you. But I think as I just mentioned, both the countries, for their own reasons, they wanted this deal to happen. But I would still think, the elephant in the room, as we discussed in our last editor's take, is Israel. Israel is definitely not part of the deal. You know what? The way I look at things, I'll start with the US. US was not gaining anything. And if history is any indicator, in this quarter of a century, US, they went to Afghanistan. US went to Iraq war. I don't think so they made any gains in Iraq or Afghanistan, and here we are in Iran as well. So they haven't done really well in all these countries. So I think that is pretty much a challenge for us. Now, if we talk about the current scenario that we are witnessing over here, so US definitely, I was talking this earlier as well. President Trump, he doesn't want this sort of distraction. Why? Because he didn't solve the Russia-Ukraine war. There are midterms approaching. He wants, when these soccer games will go, the FIFA World Cup will head towards the playoffs. He would want to be there in action. He's been there in the stadiums at the launch events as well. So he would want to be there. There are semifinals. The entire world is watching. We don't know which countries will be there in the playoffs. I mean, out of these 48. But I'll do a separate program on that. But I think when you have France, I think they would go in the playoffs. I think so. When you have France, when you have Spain, when you have Brazil, these are all huge countries, amazing fan following. So when you have Spain, France, Brazil, these countries, Germany could go in the playoffs. So these countries, Canada, sorry, as much as I was saying, Canada, I don't think so will go in the playoffs. So these are huge countries. I mean, millions of people watching. President Trump would want to be there at the stadium. President Trump midterms are approaching. We have the G20 summit. So I don't think so Trump would want to be distracted too much. And for so many other reasons, the Democrats, they're questioning right now, what did we gain out of this war? Why did we start in first place? There are articles after articles. And many of the mainstream media outlets, I was reading an article the other day on New York Times, they said, I mean, they're almost mocking what the president has to say. So they're not only questioning right now. So the late night talk shows there, I was listening to one of them, Strait of Hormuz, we're going to open that, or Iran is not going to put any toll. So when was the last time in the last 50 or 100 years did Iran ever put a toll on? So I think President Trump, he wants to dial down, he wants to paddle back. And Iran, for its own reasons, Iran, we definitely know their firepower was decimated, their economy, and now they have an option of selling oil at par with the international prices. For so much of time, they've been selling oil, to China at a discounted price. And this is a chance for them to maybe even sell at premium as well, because there's some sort of oil deficit across the globe. So, or at least at par with the international price. So the sanctions could be lifted. Iran could get some money, maybe because a lot of their assets, a lot of their finances were frozen in India, in China, in Europe, in US, maybe in Canada as well. So we don't even know how much that total money. So Iran could start getting back that money. So both the countries, for their own individual reasons, they want a ceasefire. But here is Israel. You know what? Lately, I've been thinking earlier, many people would think this as a conspiracy theory, the greater Israel. No, it is a reality. And I think as much as Israel is now, maybe not really occupying the whole territory as a greater Israel, but I think here is Israel at its wish, you could go and attack West Bank, fine. People are questioning, but then is Israel listening? That's the bigger question. Then Israel goes to Gaza, attack, do whatever. Israel goes to Lebanon, creates a buffer zone. Israel goes to Iran. We've seen attacks earlier. Last year there was an attack, 12-day war, and now Israel goes in a full-fledged war against Iran. UAE with direct flights and all that, Abraham Accords, and with the pressure from US, there's no one who's questioning with all these Abraham Accords. So I think Israel would want this to continue. They'll still want to weaken Iran a little bit more. So how long this peace deal would last, it's a very fragile thing. It's anybody's guess.
And I just want to say one thing. When you say the word buffer zone, let's be realistic. It's called occupation. Because if you want to have a buffer zone, meaning having military between yourselves and what would be, other factions, in this case, the terrorist organization of Hezbollah, for example, your buffer zone would be in your own country. It wouldn't be in another country, right? Let's be honest. When we have our Canadian military, we would have them, if we have at our border, it'd stay within Canada. It wouldn't go into the American side, right? In a situation where we have a border situation, like we're seeing with Lebanon and in Israel. And we know that part of the Greater Israel Plan, which has been openly discussed by the Prime Minister of Israel, and it's been something very open. It did include that southern portion of Lebanon to the Litani River, right? So if you want to, marketing terms calling it buffer zone, but the realistic terms is called occupation of a foreign land and just seizing it. Because there's 1.4 million Lebanese people who've been displaced and haven't so far been able to go back to their homes in southern Lebanon.
Yeah.
And we in Toronto live in the southern border of, in an hour and a half, we're going to be at the US border. If we're ever in a situation where we're never, if a border, of our country is occupied, calling it a buffer zone, and we're never to go back to it, then, let's call it for what it is.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you're right. And actually, in first place, no country should be given this right to create any sort of zone, whether we want to call it buffer zone or an occupation. They shouldn't be allowed. That's what I was just mentioning earlier as well. I mean, as much as there are questions raised in Europe, in Canada as well, I've heard our foreign minister also raising questions, but the bigger question is Israel doesn't listen to anyone, and that is an issue. So the greater Israel that we've been hearing now, I think for them, again, I'll use the word for them, it has come to fruition for Israel. I'm not talking for anybody else here. So yes, because they say, okay, wherever we want, we can go and do whatever. As much as I've always condemned the October 7 attack on the Israeli citizens, I've always condemned that. And as far as this zone that they've created, their plea is this is against Hezbollah. And I think the Lebanese people, they won't want Hezbollah to stay over there. And I think I was listening to Hezbollah as well. They're saying we haven't done any major operations since this war broke out. But they haven't done any major operation. But will they carry on attacks once this ceasefire is implemented? Yeah,
who came to the aid of Lebanon in this past, since March 2nd or 3rd, with Lebanese people being killed? Who's come to their aid? Has any country come to their aid?
Actually,
other than Iran in this case, because this peace deal of this MOU includes Lebanon.
There are many countries who, okay, there are two aspects to this. There are many countries who did send aid to Lebanon, including Canada as well. And we did a program over here. There was an organization from England, and they are supplying, they've been supplying aid to Lebanon for many, many years. And even recently also they went to Lebanon and they were supplying. So we had a detailed discussion on that aspect, that how they went to the Middle East, how they're supplying. And this is an organization, they were not only supplying aid to Lebanon as we speak, but they've also worked in Gaza and many other areas as well. So this is a British organization, so we had a detailed discussion with them, and they're raising funds from Canada as well. So we did join hands with them for fundraising efforts from Canada, and their entire team was here. The Canadian team was here as well. So we did discuss that as well. But the political aspect, I've already mentioned that. You can question, you can make statements or do whatever, for whatever reason. As much as I've condemned that very openly, but does Israel listen? Israel does not listen to anyone.
Well, but because they've been positioned in a way to have a lot of aid and a lot of support from the European Union countries, from their biggest ally, the United States. They've had the level of protection and they've had a lot of funding for what they're doing, right? They've been positioned to do that. And there's been a lot of things about AIPAC, right? In terms of how much of that money is going into American politics to have some of these things take place, with them going into war and having the backing. So now I want to backtrack a little bit and just remind everyone what took place to this before this MOU agreement that we're hearing now. Both sides say, both now the United States and Iran say that it's going to be signed and that things have been negotiated on, because previous to that, we've had, the American side say, oh, we're close to a deal, and Iran saying we're not even talking. So at least we're hearing from both sides are on the same page. But what took place was, if you recall, we went into a ceasefire on the night of April 7th, right? This was before President Trump said they're going to bomb the entire civilization, making all kinds of statements that is just not something you would do. But then quickly after saying, Iran has proposed, a 10-point plan and we're going to review it. And that was through Pakistan. And then they had their first sit down with Vice President J.D. Vance at the meeting. And this was in Islamabad. And then they, after I think it was 20 hours or so of negotiations, realized they're not going to come to a deal. Now, what took place in that was, prior to that meeting, it was a 10 points agreement that Iran had put forward. And on that was, things in terms of sanctions lifting and to be able to remove the sanctions, to be able to have reparations for the war, and a few other items, and that Lebanon is included in all of that. And then when Vice President J.D. Vance came to the first meeting to have a discussion, which was shortly after the April 8th, so I would say, it was like a few days after that, what happened was then the red lines changed. It went from, it went to like no uranium enrichment for 20 years, right? It went from removing enriched uranium. So there were some red lines that were introduced in that first sit down, which is why they didn't come to an agreement, because it was very different from the proposal Iran had sent. And then there's been a lot of reports that Vice President J.D. Vance really didn't have the authority to agree on anything. He was actually making calls to the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Israel and trying to get their both approvals on things. So he was pretty much like the scanner in the room, like take in what's being said and then go and relay the message to see if he can talk on anything. So really, we saw the difference in that the Iranian negotiators came and they had full authority to agree or disagree. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance, so it kind of set J.D. Vance up for a situation where, he wasn't the authority in the room, and then the red lines were changing. So then they walk away from that. Then we go into a stalemate where we don't know if there's a peace agreement. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. It's still affecting our oil prices, energy prices. And then we have the American blockade of their vessels blockading Iran's ports, which was leverage in a sense, because so far Iran had the leverage with the Strait of Hormuz, which I think is what really got them to a ceasefire to begin with, right? The pressure that it was creating in the global economy. And then also, of course, with the GCC countries that were being attacked by Iran. And so you had that entire thing that created a ceasefire. But then the leverage that I think the United States took back from Iran was creating a blockade on its ports, saying, you know what, now we're going to prevent you from trading, right? Everyone else's economy is being hurt. Now we're going to put pressure on you, so you can't send your vessels to China. So then we saw a few weeks, I would say probably like now, 2 months, less than 2 months of just not knowing what's going to happen. Then what happened was, it was when just a few days ago where you had Iran attack Israel, Haifa, the third largest city. And then to that, President Trump said, stop, because Israel, they've been what's happening in southern Lebanon, and there's been missiles into Beirut, capital of Lebanon. And then so when Iran did some of those missiles, then President Trump said, stop, you both have now targeted, now it's done, like saying, tit for tat, done. And then what happened was, then the next day, a U.S. Hibachi helicopter was circulating the Strait of Hormuz, to which then Iran sent a missile to hit it. Its pilots, were rescued in the water. And then Iran sent missiles to the GCC countries of the U.S. base. And then that looked like everything was going to escalate again. President Trump saying that he's going to destroy the country. And then hours later, then it was like, no, we've come this far in our agreement, so therefore we're going to proceed. And then that's when he said, we're going to have a signing on Sunday, June 14th. Now, what happened was on Sunday, June 14th, is you had Hezbollah send a missile to northern Israel. Israel then bombarded Beirut, and if you've seen the images, it looks very bad. And then Iran was going to then go into war with Israel. As soon as the indications were there that Iran was going to strike Israel is when President Trump put up that Truth Social statement that, the deal is complete, we're going to sign. So in a way, it's like it triggered off with the potential escalations of what would happen to Israel and the restart of everything. And then you have President Trump going to the G7, and the G7 countries have been hit hard when it comes to their energy prices. Inflation numbers are going up because energy prices are roughly 40% of what what the inflation numbers are. So I want to just go over a Truth Social statement by President Trump that he posted right before he said about the deal. He goes, and I sent it to her so we can go big on this. It goes, this morning's attack on Beirut should not have happened. particularly on a special day when we're so close to a peace deal with Iran. Israel has the right to defend itself against threats, but the attack it was responding to was very small and meaningless. Nobody was hurt, injured, or killed, and should not disrupt this important process. So he's now referring to what Hezbollah did in terms of the attacks into northern Israel by calling it, but the attack it was responding to, meaning Israel, it was very small and meaningless. So can you imagine saying that an attack from Hezbollah was small and meaningless, nobody was hurt, injured, or killed, and should not disrupt the important processes, meaning to responding to what we saw take place with the bombs, the missiles from the Israeli side into Beirut, capital city of Lebanon. And then he wrote, we're very close to a deal that will bring peace to the region, including to Lebanon, and all sides should stand down. There should be no more attacks by Israel anywhere in Lebanon, but there should only be no more attacks by any other party, including Hezbollah, against Israel. This could be the beginning of a long, beautiful peace. And let's not blow it. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. So then hours later, he wrote the deal with Islamic Republic of Iran. So he posted that knowing that getting information that Iran is now going to attack Israel because of what took place in Beirut. And then he wrote the deal with Islamic Republic of Iran is now complete. Congratulations to all. And then pretty much, putting a nice bow on it, and before he gets on his Air Force One to go to G7.
Yeah. We all knew this was coming, whatever the trigger points could be. As much as you were mentioning that, there could be an escalation between Iran and Israel, I think Israel would definitely prefer that. And Iran didn't have much to lose anyways. So I think both the countries, if there was an escalation, which would have been very unfortunate, but for now, as I just mentioned, Iranian Navy is not that big. It's no match for US and Israel combined together. Iranian Navy, their force has been decimated. They don't have much to offer anyway. So what would they do? And even if they were targeting any bases of US, the bases are empty. They've taken the hardware too. Not just the US forces are out of most of these bases, but they also taken away the hardware as well. So they could be based maybe some of the US base in Turkey, some of them could be there, or they could be somewhere in the ocean, but definitely Iran doesn't have much options left. So as much as, the trigger point could be anything, but here it is. This was coming, as I was just mentioning, both these countries, whether it was US or Iran, both these countries wanted the deal to happen desperately. So that is, I would assume that is precisely the reason that now they've started talking. And you're right. I mean, there was a point, and I'll touch more about the nuclear ambitions of Iran as well. I was just listening to the statements, while leaders are assembling in France for the G7 summit. Most of the leaders have said this, and the European Union also has said this. We're ready to lift the sanctions. Germany, France, England, they would all lift the sanctions. European Union as together, as whole, they will lift the sanctions. But they're all mentioning one very important point. And China mentioned that too earlier. Israel and US have mentioned that multiple times. We do not want Iran to carry on with its nuclear ambition. That's a different point. We can discuss that, whether Iran has a right to do that or not. But here is Iran. I think that out of all these points, I think that is the number one issue here. I'm not saying for me, I'm not saying it's a genuine issue, but for US and most of the Western world. And it's not for the Western world as well. If you ask China, China's openly said this. Would Russia want a nuclear-armed Iran? I doubt so. Even Pakistan, their next door neighbor, Pakistan has a nuclear weapon. Would Pakistan want Iran to have a nuclear weapon? I doubt so. I'm not sure. They haven't made a statement on this. India hasn't made a statement on this because India and Pakistan, they want to keep their ties intact with Iran, and because India definitely has a lot to gain from Iran with its oil deals, and they also made a massive deal at developing the Chabahar port in Iran. So India had and at one time India was buying a lot of oil from Iran as well. So at this point, I think that is, I think the devil is...
So question here,
Sure, go
is
ahead.
Iran, if it wanted to have nuclear weapons, could it do that
Right
on
now?
its own? No, ever. If Iran had planned to have nuclear weapons,
Yeah.
does it have the capability to do that on its own?
No, for now it does not have.
No. I mean, in general, if it was part of their mission, if it was an objective to complete, could it have done that so far?
No.
How come?
Because the uranium grade that you need to be enriched, the amount of uranium and the level of enrichment that you need uranium to be enriched, Iran was never able to attain that. So that is the reason that Iran was, up until this time, they were not able to do that. Of course, they haven't opened up to IAEA, the entire places were open to inspection, but the intelligence, I know US missed out on India. US knew about Pakistan, but when India became a nuclear country, there was, in that decade, it was the biggest failure of the American intelligence. Initially, they said, no, it's a fluke, it's a dud. No, that cannot happen. How can India really, when India test fired they did 5 tests, and India declared we are nuclear. The very next day, Pakistan test fired 6 and Pakistan declared nuclear. Pakistan, they knew how it happened and all that, but and there could be a reason that yes, all the intelligence failure could be there for Iran as well, but maybe, but for now, whatever intelligence is coming out or whatever, and they were open to IAEA inspections as well. That's the reason that you had the deal with during the Obama times. That was the deal.
It was they weren't able to refine it outside of civilian purposes.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're talking about very low percentage. And so when that was 2015, when 2019, Trump is president in his first term, he rips up the deal. Then it goes from enriched uranium from 3% to 60%. Yeah. But the previous Ayatollah Khamenei, who was assassinated during the start of this war with US and Israel on February 28th, there was a fatwa not to have a nuclear program, not to have nuclear weapons. So the interesting thing is that when a country doesn't have nuclear weapons, right, and it's a fatwa of that, the supreme leader, meaning we're not going to do that. So then when you have Israel that has nuclear weapons, you have US that has nuclear weapons, and that's why you had the Democrats asking questions in the House saying, please tell us about what kind of nuclear weapons Israel has. How come we all know about it, but nobody wants to talk about it? And you have 2 nuclear nations targeting a country that doesn't have it, had the law not to have it, had a deal that the US ripped up. So at the end of the day, for us to talk about, China doesn't want them to have a nuclear weapon, they don't have a nuclear weapon. They didn't have it before, they don't have it now, they don't have it tomorrow, right? So it's interesting because you can hear statements in the news, but then what's the validity of the statement? Why are you in the war to begin with? Because I remember you said it was because you want to change the regime, not because Iran has nuclear weapons, which it doesn't, because no one's been able to show it so far, right? So it's been, I want to change the regime. Okay, now the regime, you changed the Ayatollah, but you didn't change the regime. So now that this new deal that is in the MOU, it's a 60-day ceasefire. It's going to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. It's going to suspend some of the oil sanctions, like you said. So now Iran's going to be able to sell, not in the black market, but possibly and not below market level. And then you have the releasement of approximately $24 billion of frozen Iranian assets. And this is coming from Mehr News, which is from Iran. This is not coming from American news, and likely so possibly President Trump doesn't want to reveal what's in it, but we're going to know on Friday when the MOU is signed how much truth there is to what we're seeing from Mehr News, that there's going to be a release of $24 billion in frozen Iranian assets. And then they're talking about a proposed reconstruction package worth almost $300 billion for Iran. And in this MOU, it has nothing to do, it doesn't say anything about Iran's ballistic missile program. It says nothing about Iran's backed regional groups such as Hezbollah, and nothing about Iran's broader regional influence in the network. Yet it has some, yet Lebanon's included. So every way you read what Iranian media is saying, it looks like this is a deal that, they didn't have access to prior to February 28th before this war broke out. And might I remind you, they were in the process of a negotiation in Oman with the United States for an agreement. And this was because of the 12-day war in 2025 with Israel, United States, and Iran. So now the deal that they're having prior to February 28th that they were striking up is a lot different. We're talking about removal of sanctions on oil. We're talking about, releasing $24 billion of frozen assets. We're talking about a $300 billion reconstruction package. Didn't have to be part of the previous deal because there was no war. But it's very interesting to hear that. I mean, what are your thoughts? And then to this, I have to say, Israel has said that, I'm going to say the statements from, we have the statement from, you have it from, who's this? This is Ben-Gvir, who is the national security minister. His first sentence on X is, Trump's agreement does not bind us. Israel is not subject to the United States, and we are independent and sovereign nation. Okay, so, my question is, what do you think about this potential deal that's in the MOU for Iran and the United States? And then you also have this fracture of what's looking like between the two greatest allies, the United States and Israel.
Yeah, great points, by the way, and your questions are absolutely valid. First things first, we just got the message that our colleague Shubi, he would be joining us in a few minutes from now. So we will be listening from him what's happening there in Switzerland, what's happening there in Evian, France, because that's where the G7 summit will be happening. So we will be heading live back once again. So we'll be heading to France for the G7 summit. So Shubi will be joining us very shortly live from France for the G7 summit. We'll talk about that. The other thing, yeah, you're right. You know what, if you ask me, and this is what we do on Editor's Take, as much as we share the information, but we share our opinions as well, both you and I. So on Editor's Take, yeah, I would agree to that. And, it was hypocrisy wrapped all over this whole nuclear thing. Why? Because you've already built nuclear weapons. Russia has them. US has the nuclear weapons. There are other countries, including Israel, India, Pakistan, they all have that. And then you want other countries to sign NPT. Just for our audience benefit, I'd like to tell you that has been discussed. India didn't sign for, they were pressurizing India as well. So India said, no, we're not going to sign NPT. NPT is non-nuclear proliferation treaty. And you cannot, they didn't want anybody to go ahead. And you know what, in 98, when India test fired and claimed that, yes, we've gone nuclear. So there were a lot of sanctions put on India at that time, from Canada to Japan to the entire European Union and to US as well. But look at that, how quickly things changed. By 2004-06, US and some European nations were discussing nuclear deal with India. And Indian Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh and US President, they were all guns blazing for a Indo-US nuclear deal. So a few years ago, you're putting all sorts of sanctions. So you're right. Depends, where you are in this world order. And we'll talk maybe in this Editor's Take, or later we could talk how the world order would change after this US-Iran conflict. We'll talk about that as well. But yeah, Iran didn't have, but if you would ask me, does Iran have an ambition for a nuclear deal, or did it have an ambition for a nuclear deal? Whatever the fatwa could say, that's fine. But I wouldn't just listen to the fatwa, what their former supreme leader would give. I would also see what the Iranian Revolutionary Guards are thinking, what's the establishment is thinking, what is the opinion of the civil leadership, and how far they've taken this ahead. I'm not in this favor that you would want, and this is part of the deal now, because President Trump has said the deal has already been signed, because I was continuously looking at, and by the way, the moment we broke this news, we even broke it when when the Pakistani Prime Minister announced that. So we broke the news. The moment Pakistani Prime Minister announced that, I broke the news there, and then it was flashing on a channel. And that time, in just a couple of minutes, I saw the US President also announce the deal. And then later on, we saw the Ministry of External Affairs of, the Foreign Ministry from Iran saying that, yes, things are working. Not directly the Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, no, his deputy, he's the one who said this. But what I'm saying is they're saying the deal has been signed. I also want to look at this. What is this deal? Because what I'm hearing right now, they haven't divulged the details, but what I'm hearing right now, one of the main things could be that Iran would open up, fine, come do all the inspections, whether it's IAEA who does the inspection or it's US or any other body monitored inspections, because they're now focusing on one very important aspect, that billions of dollars in frozen assets coming back to Iran, because they need money. As you were asking, who would go to aid Lebanon? That's the big question for Iran too. Who's going to come to our aid? We've fired rockets on all the cities, over here. Okay, who else is left? India, maybe. Sorry, go ahead.
I didn't mean aid money. I meant like
aid,
to stop them
to
protect them, to stop. The reason we send money is because first we destroy countries, and then we send them some money and say, here you go, but we're still going to bomb you. We're still going to exploit your people. We're still going to keep you poor with sanctions, but here's some money. I didn't mean that. Yeah,
no, I got your point. But what I'm saying is, at least in that case, what I'm saying, you're right. I got your point that yes, in that case, when you were asking who came to aid Lebanon, you meant who came to rescue. So nobody came to the rescue.
Stop this war. Yeah.
Stop this war. You're right.
The bombing, the killing.
Yeah, the only thing that was poured in was the aid. Of course, aid is needed. But in Iran's case, the bigger question is who would come to aid Iran right now, or how will they fund, or how would they finance?
Iran is saying we don't need the money. Give us back our money. Let us open our ports. Let us sell our oil, and then we won't put a toll on the Strait of Hormuz. Yeah. It's all leverage on leverage on leverage, which is why it shocked the world, because they're saying you have two nuclear nations who are going into war with a country and their economy has been collapsed. Their inflation numbers are above the thing, and and here they are, they're surviving. They're saying, no, we're going to do this the way they're standing up. And I got to tell you something. If you watched on YouTube the cultural sort of, okay, so there's two things when it comes to war, right? There's the physical combat, right, with the missiles and unfortunate loss of lives and injuries to people and to civilizations and infrastructure. And then you have the cultural war, right? Usually, in the case of when a country wants to go to war, they create a cultural propaganda to their people to kind of get them to support a war, right? We saw this after 9/11 when it was under, W. Bush. And he said, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and, the evils and all that. Then you had the Iraq and Afghanistan war, and that was all perpetuated, and even though the UN did not find weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, the war still went on because there was like a cultural element to like get your people to buy in, because it's their tax dollars going to war. Right? Mm-hmm. I mean, where does the government get their money from? It's people's tax dollars. And when it's not spent back into their country, this is now being spent in foreign wars. And so when the president of the United States, Trump, goes into war on February 28th, nobody knew who was going to do that. And then he turns around and says Israel was going to do it, and we decide to go with it. And there's a clip. I mean, I keep saying it, but there's a clip with Marco Rubio and saying, Israel was going to go ahead, so we joined them. And same thing, and then because we might have had casualties if we didn't join them, saying that we didn't have any control. President Trump even said the same thing. And then the President Trump says, oh, we didn't know they were going to close the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, it's been something from like the Shah of Iran, we're talking about, half a century ago, said he would do, right? And this is something. So my point being is that this was all like very evident. It was all going to be in this place, and now you have the president who's trying to get out of something he started, thinking it's going to be like Venezuela, in and out. Have somebody that they can deal with, remove the Ayatollah, go take the oil, just simple, basic stuff that it's proven that it's not possible with a country that has high inflation, has sanctions for half a century, has been bombarded, has had their leaders killed, and yet here it is making a deal where now it's saying sanctions removed on their oil, give us back about, $25 billion of our money. Like, this is significant.
Yeah.
Which they would never had a chance to do with previous to the war on February 28th. Those were never items that they were going to negotiate on. So did Trump do a bad deal?
Yeah. Great points. For first things first, you're right. I mean, for any country, they will set aside their differences when they're attacked. And that's exactly what happened in Iran. We were witnessing so many protests across the globe against the Iranian regime. But here we are, when this war was launched. How many protests have we witnessed? We had thousands of people taking onto the streets in Britain, US, from LA to New York, from Vancouver to Toronto. But where are all those protesters now? To your point, and I won't even call it propaganda. I mean, it's a natural phenomenon. It's a very organic thing, because every country, when they're attacked, it's a national pride. And here you have, the Persian community. I want to talk about Iran. This is the Persian community. They have a cultural background, a historic background. They have a legacy of thousands of years. So they take pride in that. So to tell the Persian people, okay, fine, we will tell you, we'll do the regime change. Of course, it was like a Venezuelan style thing at a much broader scale. US did know this, that yes, it's a 90 million plus people, and even if you look at the geographical area of Iran, it's you had to combine, I think, half of if you put aside the North American nations, which are huge, US and Canada, but the European nations, I mean, half of the G7 nations would really, fit into the demographic size of Iran. That's how big demographically Iran is. So it's not easy. They've tasted all this in Afghanistan and Iraq. If Afghanistan and Iraq you can control, they knew this thing. It's very difficult to contain Iran for a very longer period of time. It's a huge country, and then there are 60.
Yeah, the difference was in Iraq and Afghanistan, there was boots on the ground.
Yeah.
In Iran, there was no boots on the ground.
Yeah.
They didn't even attempt. They tried, I think, and that's when those helicopters were shot down. And then there was, do you remember when there was 50,000 euros was the bounty to find those pilots? I think that was them trying to go and boots on the ground to see, because there was a mission on remove the enriched uranium that's been bombed and it's underground. And then there was lots of talks, where you had the pro-war, the neocons in Trump's administration and the Republican Party. And then all of a sudden you had the downing of that helicopter, and then there was a bounty for them, and then there was a quick rescue by Israel, and then Trump was wondering who released that information, only to find out Israel did. So there's a lot of weird things that happened, and then after that incident, they were not talking about boots on the ground. So it's a completely different situation because they didn't invade Iran.
Yeah, getting boots on the ground, it's always challenging. It has been challenging, because we've seen that in Vietnam War. One of the reasons why Vietnam War was, really it was a challenge to defend, and there was a big challenge. Of course, there weren't any weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and then the Afghan war as well. You're fighting the Taliban, you're fighting to liberate a country, the democracy, and then, we're educating the girl child and so many other slogans, but they all backfired precisely for one reason. One of the major reasons that I would say, when body bags start coming back, whether it's from Vietnam, Iraq, or Afghanistan, that's the time, because, here you have your soldiers laying down their lives, they're sacrificing their families, and there's media, the optics are very different. It's very difficult for any administration to really defend what's going on here. So the boots on the ground scenario, I think the establishment was very clear on that one, that the boots on the ground, they didn't rule it out completely, but I think maybe 0.5% chance of getting the boots on the ground. They knew from the start.
Do it there. It's mountainous regions. You couldn't even do it. Even if you tried to do it from the Strait of Hormuz, even if you tried to come through Iraq, it's so mountainous. You couldn't even get to Tehran, which is in the north.
Yeah. So they already, it's not that they knew that, they already knew that. And then to your earlier point that yes, the Marco Rubio that you're saying, yeah, some of the articles are even mentioning that. Was this just an Mossad, not even an Israeli operation, they're even mentioning, was it just a Mossad operation? I mean, what benefit, I mean, nobody can explain a single benefit for US. No benefit at all. This war was a major, challenge for US, and I doubt they're going to. There's no reason to defend that. There's loss of lives. There's a lot of economy, inflation, oil. Look at the announcement came, and the oil prices are going down.
Stockpiles, yeah. Crude today is at $80, right? On all of them, yeah.
It was 70 before the start of the war, yeah.
And it went up to, remember, $117 per barrel at height. Yeah. But now you have this thing where a couple of things. Now I wonder, and even the U.S. stockpiles, right? Yeah. It's been depleted. They've even said. So I wonder now, when Iran said it was going to hit Israel and had plans to go into full-fledged attacks on Israel on Sunday, and then President Trump said there's a deal done, because I would imagine that the U.S. then would have to get back into war and defend Israel as its greatest ally. And given that it's low on its stockpiles, it's already depleted a lot of its resources. And so it was like, okay, let's protect Israel, because then Israel would have to retaliate. And then we're in a full-blown war again, because then the U.S. can't just sit back and be like, we're not a part of this. So I wonder if that was a thing. And then the other question is, given until Friday, what will Israel do to potentially torpedo this deal? Because we saw that happen at the ceasefire with them continuing with their mission in Lebanon. They've even now said that they're going to continue with this. And as I said, I read Ben-Gvir's statement that, I'll read the first sentence again. He goes into more detail. You can go on X. Ben-Gvir says, Trump's agreement does not bind us. Israel's not subject to the United States, and we are independent and sovereign nation. Meaning, and he goes, our duty is to our citizens of Israel, to the soldiers of IDF, and to the Jewish people. And then he goes on and on, saying whatever the president's saying has nothing to do with us.
Yeah. Two different points, First things, Iran, if it wants to go for a full-blown war with Israel, I doubt it can do much. With due respect, I'm saying that.
I agree.
Yeah, So because we have to understand, three things we have to understand over here. One, I'll start with this one in no particular order. First things first, the distance between Iran and Israel. Of course, it has its proxies, the Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis, but they've been tamed quite a bit now. So Iran has really, that was the major objective of Iran anyways, to really weaken the forces of Hamas, Houthis, and Hezbollah. Of course, they will never go away, they're still there. But, then the distance would matter. The second thing is the firepower, whether it's the Air Force or, you're not sending troops there anyway. So what would you actually do? How would the full-blown war, if we're talking about that, how would you do a full-blown war against Israel? The only thing that'll come mainly into play is the air power. The air power could be drones, the air power could be ballistic missiles, the air power could be your fighter jets. So with due respect, I'm saying this again, how much of your air power, because they're not going to send military, okay? There's nothing like that. Just stay where you are, stay in Iran. So what are you going to do? You don't have, an AK-47, a Kalashnikov, that cannot start firing till Israel. So you're sitting there and with due respect, again, I'm saying, you're probably actually, if it's a full-blown war, things could have really gotten worse, because then you're sitting ducks for the air power or the firepower of actually Israel and US.
But that's the whole thing. US didn't want to go back into war. Because the timing, you have to wonder.
Yeah, that part agreed.
Why? Because Iran was going to go, because after the strikes on Beirut, Iran was going to go into attack Israel. That's something they made an announcement of. And then right hours later, you have President Trump saying, there's a deal signed. It includes Lebanon. Everything's fine. We're good to go. And then also Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, is in Congress today, and he's saying that it's untrue, because there's reports that U.S. has has gotten down so much on their stockpiles and their ability that's going to take them years to be able to replenish because of this war. We looked at the stats that the Iranian missiles, drones were like, it would cost anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000, and the what the U.S. had to do in terms of blocking some of those missiles would cost like $500,000 to be able to intercept, right? So when you take a look at how much money, there was an estimate that the U.S. was spending about $1 billion a day. That was just a roundabout figure. We don't even know the full amount. And so you have to wonder what's with the timing to protect Israel also because, and what's interesting here is, if Israel goes into war, U.S. has to defend it. But when U.S. is a peace deal, Israel says it has nothing to do with us. We're sovereign and we're independent. But when it goes into war, it's our greatest allies, the United States. And then yet, it's interesting how it seems one-sided based on what the objectives are.
Yeah. My only question, you're right, all these things. Only 2 points on this one. Again, I mentioned both these points earlier as well, but maybe it's worth repeating, The first thing first, that yes, US and Iran, they both needed something. We could talk about the trigger points. Both of them needed to end this war. It was the only country which doesn't want this war to end. That's Israel. We all know that. That's why it's not part of the deal. We've not heard them saying anything. So both these countries, the trigger point could be anything, number one. The second point is that yes, as much as we could say a full-blown war, but what is India and Pakistan, they just fought a war. It was a full-blown war. There was no stopping for, okay, Pakistan, you cannot do this thing. You have a nuclear weapon, use it. And they've been saying this, that we haven't kept all these nuclear weapons for Diwali. So India said, fine, you might as well use it. We're attacking your air bases. You are announcing that your personnel in Air Force are dying. So you've announced their names, their pictures. So we're shooting them left, right, and center. You might as well come on, let's have a full-blown war. But then Pakistan said, that's it. Because they knew the next thing India would start a naval thing. That's the exact situation for Iran as well right now. Full-blown war. What does the full-blown war look like? You don't have, your army can't go anywhere other than just...
I'll explain.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll explain.
Yeah.
What it is if Iran kept its word on, which was probably going to strike Israel, then Israel would retaliate, right? And then U.S. would be drawn in immediately. U.S. is not going to sit back and watch them attacking each other. Then you have the Strait of Hormuz lockdown again. Then you have the El Mandeb Strait, which is on the Red Sea, blocked by the Houthis. And so then you have a situation where oil's not leaving the Strait of Hormuz, and it's not going through the Red Sea from the El Mandeb Strait, and therefore that Saudi now can't send oil from its either side because it's got its pipelines. It affects again your GCC countries because they're also taking the attacks. None of them have ever launched a missile into Iran, even though there was UAE that was intercepted, which was, a few weeks ago. So we're talking about the conflict, which includes, the GCC countries, Qatar, Kuwait, Oman, UAE, Saudi, and then you have what's happening with Israel and Iran, and then you have two waterways, which will control now 30 to 40% of the world's energy blocked. And then from the Red Sea, it goes through the Suez Canal, goes to Europe, and then from the Strait of Hormuz, it goes to, Asia, and then he's now seeing most of them European countries, as well as Japan. Japan relies 65% of its energy from the Strait of Hormuz. All of the Europe has been hit with their inflation numbers. So you can't afford it because even though, yes, it's not going to have a full-on war with Israel the same way, but it's going to attack, again, the GCC countries that are your oil producing, and it's going to close off all of through its own mission through Strait of Hormuz and through the Houthis, and then you still have Hezbollah. So it's like multi-directional attacks, which the president already got a taste for.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, this is what I was actually referring to earlier as well. The full-blown war, with due respect, I'm saying may or may not be the reason. But when you're talking about full-blown war, maybe you meant the soft target, that has, and that's basically the choking points for you.
That's what the war has been the last those 40 days. That's what we saw. So it would be more of that.
More of that, yeah. And you're right. U.S. definitely
nothing out of what we've already witnessed and gone through, and it's affected our oil prices here.
Yes, you're right.
Right. So even though Canada wasn't in a war, the war has come to our gas prices and the costs of goods and groceries. which is
Everywhere.
why we have a groceries benefit plan for 12 million Canadians. They dropped the 10 cents on the gas excise here for us to, because, and then our inflation numbers went up a little bit. Therefore, Bank of Canada is keeping the rate. We're not directly in the war, but we're affected by the war.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, everyone is affected with
And
the war.
this is during stalemate. This is during ceasefire. Imagine if it started up again.
It started up again, yeah. And everybody wants this war to end, whether you ask any country in Asia as well. India is already facing a lot of challenges. China is facing challenges. Japan, you're right, from Indonesia to Singapore to Australia. There's no country on this planet. They're not to Europe. The entire Europe is facing its own
I think
challenge.
the United States wanted to end the war more than Iran, and I'll explain why.
Go ahead.
I'll explain why. Because Iran's different in a sense where there's the will of the people, and then there's the regime that is fighting for its existence, right? You had ongoing protests, 2025, ongoing protests, civil revolution, it appeared to be what was looking like in Iran in the beginning of the year, in the months of January and February, right? And so this regime gets decimated because it loses its Ayatollah, it loses its key figures in the regime, and then we don't even know the new Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei. No one has really seen him. They've only heard reports, even though just recently Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, and President Trump saying, "Oh no, he's well and alive and he's negotiating." I don't know what that sort of PR was for Mojtaba Khamenei, but so far we don't know, and we knew that his state was in a bad condition because all his family pretty much passed away from those attacks. So you have a regime that is fighting two fronts. One was the civil war that was looking like in their own country with their own people, and then what it looked like from the from Israel and the United States, and then really nobody coming to their defense, right? Just like so they'd have to fight out. So I think they could have gone a lot longer because they want it's a survival of the regime, and also they want to appear strong in front of the public, saying, "Look, we got a good deal for you. Look what we were able to do by withstanding, also taming down the civil unrest."
Okay, and we will have our colleague Shubi joining us very shortly. I just got this information that he'll be joining us very shortly. But if you really wanted me to not pick the sides exactly, but name, as you've already said that it was in U.S. interests more than Iran to really, go ahead.
No, it's in both their interests, but I'm saying Iran could have gone longer because the regime is fighting for their survival. It's completely different in terms of what it needed to do, not getting a weak deal and not to dismantle, because they're fighting two wars, one with the U.S. and Israel, and then obviously the GCC countries who are not so friendly with you, but also with your people they wanted to remove the regime.
Yeah. I'll just say this, that as much as I've been studying a lot of Iranian media and on that side, because not just the Western media as well, because yes, Iran was facing its severe challenges in many aspects. I won't go into the details, but if you want, the political aspect is one side, inflation, economy, how do they rebuild all these things? And that is why, with all this deal, this is what you're listening now, the lifting of the sanctions, getting their money back, that is the key for Iran. But I'll agree to you that if we really wanted to pick a side, that who was I don't want to get into this thing, who won the war, because that's what everyone is talking. There'll be a lot of ink, put down on this. Many articles will be written down, who won the war, Iran, because that's in the social media, and that would be the clickbait. But here I don't want to say who won the war, but I agree with you. Iran was on a better place, as compared to US.
They could go longer, is my point. They could have gone longer in this stalemate than the United States.
Yeah, maybe they could have, maybe that's, but the issue is, I think US has a lot more to lose, because
that's my point.
Because there's no benefit at all for them. What is the benefit for them? They're losing by the second. It's not even by the minute. So US is losing by the second, and they have nothing to gain out of all this. So I think
now they're giving $25 billion back to Iran. They're supposedly going to give $300 billion for reconstruction. Yeah. They're lifting the sanctions on Iranian oil. I mean, the list goes on of the gifts that it looks like this regime is getting to solidify itself in place.
Yeah. So, anyways, we hope we'll get more details on all this. The details that we get right now are a little bit vague, and they're not really divulge the complete details. But yes, definitely, U.S. will say this that we. I think when when the dust settles down, the US will try to claim, one thing what we got out. This is what they'll try to claim. And to your point earlier, I think you were right in a way that even if they had an ambition, I don't think so. It was a big deal getting Iran to terms that, okay, as much as I may or may not agree with that, but getting Iran to terms forever. No, you will not. They'll say, okay, fine. Let me sign wherever you want. As much as I still believe that there is no country on this planet who doesn't want a nuclear weapon. Of course, there are a few like Japan. Maybe they don't. They're the only country who's been bombed twice with nuclear weapons. And I clearly remember, when USSR disintegrated, there were countries who had nuclear weapons, but they said, you know what? We don't want nuclear weapons. And I read an article many years ago that was very interesting. The same weapons which Russia created, USSR at that time created to bomb US, and when the countries they disintegrated, so from Ukraine to Georgia, a few of those countries, they use the same uranium to have civil nuclear energy. And Boston, because even today, I mean, there's a lot of electricity, a lot of power being supplied from Ontario, from Canada, and Boston was lit by the same energy, same electricity, which was initially created to bomb US. So that was a very interesting read, But anyways, I mean, the big takeaway for US could be, Iran has agreed forever. They will not do the nuclear thing forever. But anyways, sorry, go ahead.
Do we have Shubi on?
Yeah, I think we have. But if you want to, squeeze in.
No, I'd love to hear from Shubi. He's live on, in G7.
Yeah. On Y Media, we'd like to welcome our colleague Shubi. He's there live from the G7 summit in France. Shubi, a warm welcome on Y Media. How are you?
Good, sir. Good, sir. How are you? This is Shubi reporting from Ground Zero here in France at the G7 summit.
So you've reached in France. So tell us the details. But before we even go there, you were there. Why don't we start with Geneva and Switzerland? So Shubi, you were there in Geneva, Switzerland. There were protests going on against the G7 summit, and just as you were there in Geneva and Switzerland, we heard that President Trump making announcement of the deal, and that would be signed. Of course, it is signed. Right now, they're saying digitally signed, but the formalities will be completed there in Geneva, Switzerland. So you were there at Ground Zero in Geneva. You heard what the Prime Minister had to say. So take us through all that first, and then we'll talk about the G7 summit too, please.
So yeah, Y Media, we were reporting from Ground Zero in Geneva, Switzerland, and we got there a day before, and there were massive protests that were taking place across Geneva. And one thing that we definitely saw in my experience as well was there was a huge amount of people that were out there, but it wasn't just regular peaceful protests. They were violent protests that were taking place. And the reason I say that is because you've probably been seeing on all our Y Media platforms, there were footages that we took there. There were people using fireworks against police. There's a huge amount of police officers and security guards that have been deployed in Geneva who are protesting against the G7 summit. Apart from that, there was also cars that are lit on fire. You will see shop owners boarding up their establishments because of the chaos that these protests are creating. And it's to the point where they have to use drills to open their shops in the morning and even close them at night. But there were massive amount of protests as well. The police it came down to police having to use tear gas to break down the protests as well against the G7 summit. I did speak to some of the local people there on Ground Zero, asking them, are these protests only related to the G7? And some of them said it's not only the G7, it's also the hot button topic of the Palestine and Israel issue. It is also on the hot button topic of the Iran and US war that is taking place as well. And a lot of other protest groups have attached themselves to this, but it was a huge protest that took place in Geneva as well. And right after that, Prime Minister Mark Carney did come to Geneva. He flew into Geneva along with President Trump, who followed as well. He came, then they were choppered out to Evian in France to attend the G7 summit. And as of right now, the French president and the U.S. president just finished their bilateral discussion, and a trilateral discussion took place between Canada and the European Union leaders as well.
Yeah, and we might show you some more visuals of the protests that were happening there. We're going to show you some more visuals of the protest happening in Geneva, Switzerland. This is some exclusive footage. This is an exclusive footage from Geneva, Switzerland. The protests that were happening across the UN building in Switzerland, in Geneva. So we are going to show you more visuals of that very shortly for all that. But our colleague Shubi was there to witness all that. Now, if we, Ramonaji, any questions from your side? Anything that you want to add?
Yes, it's so great to have you there and to give us this background of what's taking place. It'd be interesting to know, what did you feel in terms of our Prime Minister landing, and what are his priorities? Did he share any of those?
So in terms of priorities, I think one thing that he's going to be looking at as well is, as soon as he got off the plane, he did speak about the U.S. and Iran deal. He did say that he is happy and he welcomes that there is a deal that is being signed. But one thing that he did touch upon was that now this whole U.S. and Iran war has also kind of indicated and shown countries around the world that there needs to be some sort of resilience that countries need to have when it comes to energy, when it comes to fertilizer and a variety of other areas that they should focus on, especially when there's conflict going on. Because I think that is one thing that a lot of countries suffered during this war that was taking place between U.S. and Iran, was having issues with getting their hands on resources. So this was definitely one of his priorities. With the trilateral meeting that he had with the European Union as well, I think one thing that he's going to be focusing on, and he focused on, is having them, whether it's on the defense side, whether it's on the critical mineral side, strengthening deeper trade ties, deeper partnerships with the European Union as well. And they did come out with a statement that the European Union leaders will be coming to Canada in October as well. So they look forward to seeing each other there as well.
Great. And we're seeing visuals of the protests. Can you describe what we're seeing? Because essentially we're seeing streets that look kind of empty. We're seeing some people gathered, but did you feel safe being there? What did it feel like watching protests and what you just described?
So in terms of the visuals that you guys are seeing, there was a variety of different areas, and all of Geneva was pretty much locked off. In terms of streets, there was heavy police presence on every street corner. There were police officers, there's police cars. In the one area where majority of the protests were taking was on the main road that was right beside the riverbank in Geneva as well. And you could see people. It wasn't as safe, particularly safe, I would say. Because a lot of people were being hit with large waves of tear gas. There's other videos as well where there are people who have fireworks that are supposed to be aimed towards the sky being aimed towards police officers, and he was firing them. Not only that, there was a Tesla vehicle as well that was completely burned to the ground as well. You'll see spray paint and graffiti all over town, whether it's on the wooden boards that shopkeepers have used to board up their windows, or it's even on the actual building stone as well that says no G7. So it wasn't particularly safe in Geneva yesterday, and a lot of times when people were walking around, you'd see police officers tell you that, hey, it's not safe to be outside, please go back into your hotel rooms or your hotels or your houses, and please just make sure you guys stay there until all of this chaos is over. But it wasn't particularly safe in Geneva yesterday either, and you'll see a lot of the visuals, and I'll continuously share more visuals as well as to what is going on in Geneva, because the protests do continue today as well, as the G7 summit is taking place at the moment.
Now, we did hear that Switzerland was going to deploy 4,000 officers. So that, did you see that? And also, now that you're in France in Evian-Bay, which is where the G7 summit is, are there protests there? What is the situation there? Give us the background.
I would say it's not as chaotic here in France, that is for sure. But it's not only 4,000 police officers and security guards that were deployed. They've deployed over 16,000 security guards and police officers across the border of Switzerland and France. So there is in Switzerland, definitely in Geneva, you did see a heavy police presence, and you'll see police vans that were driving by and dropping off more officers to different checkpoints around the city as well. I was there at the UN building yesterday as well, and over there as well. Heavy police presence. People were trying to drive in certain areas, and police were saying, "No, you cannot go this way because of safety issues." So people had to reroute themselves and go from a different direction.
Yes, I mean, this is incredible hearing from you on the ground as the G7 summit is on its way. I know that tonight is a working dinner, from my understanding, from the Prime Minister and the leaders, and then tomorrow things kick off. Tell us, what you are looking forward to capturing in terms of the itinerary which they've shared with you.
Yeah, I think yesterday is a working dinner, and there is going to be a variety of bilaterals that take place tomorrow. I think one of the most important bilaterals, I think, which a lot of people have their eyes on, and I will definitely have my eye on, is the one at 11:20 a.m. tomorrow Eastern Standard Time, which is between Prime Minister Mark Carney and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. As we all know, Canada and India's ties are strengthening at a very rapid pace, and as you guys have probably already seen, there's a variety of different things that Y Media is doing out here as well and has been doing in the past, whether it was the previous G7 summit where Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney had invited Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the G7 in Alberta, Kananaskis. Y Media was there. We were covering that from the front lines. Not only that, when Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney had gone to India to with a huge delegation, whether it was in Mumbai, whether it was in New Delhi, Y Media's team was there with the Prime Minister. We were on his plane. We were covering from the front lines, and a lot of developments took in there. There was a lot of MOUs that were signed in India as well. And as of recent, we had the Indian Trade Minister Piyush Goyal come out to Canada as well with one of the biggest trade delegations that I think India has ever brought. And we were there covering that from the front lines as well. So I think one thing that people are definitely going to want to know is what happens during this bilateral meeting between Canada and India. How much, what topics are going to be discussed? What different MOUs, the trade deal that they have going, is that going to be full and final as well? We did do an exclusive interview with the High Commissioner of India after Piyush Goyal's trade delegation had come as well. So that is one of the bilaterals that I think is going to be very interesting to keep an eye out for tomorrow, and it's very important for our viewers as well.
Thank you so much. And what I think is noteworthy is that you have the Canadian Prime Minister and the American President. They don't have a scheduled meeting. And we know that, in just 2 weeks away, we're going to have the Kuzma review. So we're all keeping an eye on that. We're talking about, a $1 trillion agreement between the United States, Mexico, and Canada, $3.5 billion go across our border every day, every 24 hours, the border of Canada, United States. And while we're in this situation, there is no scheduled meeting between those two leaders, the Prime Minister Carney and President Trump. So I think we're looking forward to seeing if anything changes. It's great to have you on the ground in case something comes up. But yeah, we're seeing none of that. From your side, are you seeing anything on the schedule? Because all we're seeing is there's nothing there confirmed.
No, not as of yet. There is nothing scheduled, but as soon as we get an update, one thing that we will do is we will make sure that it is splashed across all Y Media platforms, whether that's our TV channel, Channel Y Canada, Channel Y US, Y Global, Y Plus 24/7 All English channel. Make sure you have our channels in your favorites as well. And Radio 105.9 FM, Radio Y 105.9 FM. Make sure you stay tuned to that as well. Midweek newspaper, you'll keep getting your updates as well. So make sure you guys stay tuned and you have us listed in your favorites. If you are out and you are traveling, make sure you download the Y Media TV app. We will be giving minute-to-minute updates as to what's going on here at the G7 summit as well. But as of right now, there's nothing scheduled, and we look forward to seeing something being scheduled between the two as well.
Yeah, if I can just squeeze in a couple of more questions, that'll be great. But before I ask my two questions, should we, I'm putting you on spot because you're in a country which is which I think I could be wrong. I think is hot favorite to lift the FIFA Soccer World Cup. So we're in France right now. So tell us, of course, you were there in Switzerland earlier. They have amazing soccer team too. But I think if I had to pick, the top five, France will definitely be in there. I think France is definitely going to be in the playoffs. So what have you witnessed there as far as the FIFA Soccer World Cup? The French fans, the French soccer fans in particular, I guess they would be very excited. What do you have to say about that?
No, definitely. There's a lot of people walking around here. We are in the remote side of France as well. Evian is a little bit on the outskirts of France towards the border, but you do see people walking around with their jerseys representing France as well. And I think everyone is anticipating and waiting for the France opening match, which is going to be taking place very soon as well. Not only that, when I was in Switzerland too, you saw a lot of people that were there as well, protesting or not protesting. They did have their Swiss jerseys on, and they were. And as we
Okay.
know, Switzerland is in Canada's group, so it's going to be very interesting to see, how that kind of plays out as well. We do have Canada's next match, which is going to be on Thursday with Qatar. So it's going to be a very, very interesting match to watch out for. But as of right now, again, France, a very, very good team, but again, I'm going to go back to what I said back in 2022. I'm not sure if they're going to be lifting that trophy this time around.
Okay, so you don't think so. Anyways, we'll talk more about soccer once you're here. So you don't think so? France are the hot favorites to lift the trophy. Who's your favorite team? Just one, if you have
So,
to
so
pick
in,
one.
well, Argentina would be the one.
Argentina. Okay, that's fine. So then you're up against history. Why I'm saying you're up against history, because other than Brazil, and that too many decades ago, that's the only team which has won the Soccer World Cup back to back. Because if I have not seen any team winning back to back, so that was the last time Argentina when they lifted the trophy, and I doubt they could win it again. I'm not saying they won't. I'll still rate them in my top five, Argentina this time too. But yeah, they're up against the history. So let's see how it goes. We'll talk about soccer more, but if I may ask you just one question now, in the interest of time. One meeting, of course, as Ramona ji mentioned, uh, we are really anticipating. If anything changes, please do let us know. Prime Minister Mark Carney and President Trump, if at all we see their meeting face to face, if at all there's a meeting, yeah, we do have the schedule. Nothing is scheduled for now. So if that would change, please do let us know. I saw Emmanuel Macron and President Trump meeting. I've seen some other meetings as well. If there is one meeting that you're anticipating, which would that be, and why? Which meeting are you looking forward? Uh, I know Carney and Prime Minister Modi's meeting is important too, and we will be broadcasting it live right here on Y Media Group, all the platforms. The timing is New York and Toronto time. It's 11:30 a.m. So 11:30 EST Eastern Standard Time. We will be broadcasting all that live for you tomorrow on Tuesday. But any meeting that you're looking forward to see, what would that be?
I think one of them would definitely be President Trump's meeting with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. No, not that they're the biggest fans of each other, but I think that would be a very, very big meeting. I would definitely say that people should keep an eye out for, and are definitely keeping an eye out for that one. But that is probably one of the ones that I'm anticipating.
Okay, yeah, especially after the loss of sailors, and the Strait of Hormuz. So it'll be very interesting to watch. India did summon the U.S. ambassador there. And India raised a few eyebrows there as well. But here we are after February 2025. February 2025. This would be the first time that Prime Minister Modi and President Trump they'll see eye to eye. So we are also looking forward. But hopefully you'll join us soon, Ramona ji. I think that's all from Shubhi. Shubhi, thank you so much. So we'll carry on the discussion, and if there is any development, we will see you live. Just for our viewers' benefit, before I let Shubhi go, we'd like to tell you once again that our Y Media team, you see Shubhi, he's live there at the G7 summit. So if there is any development there, Y Media will carry that live for you right there from France, from the G7 summit. Thank you so much, Shubhi. Enjoy your stay. Take some rest as well. Don't watch too many soccer matches. They're one after the other. Yeah, but I know you play soccer as well, and I was testing my skills against your teammates recently, and I must say, as much as I enjoy playing soccer, but now I think it's difficult to match your skills. But at 41, Cristiano Ronaldo, he's aiming for the one elusive trophy. So he's 41, and you mentioned Argentina, Messi. How old is he? He's in 36 right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's 36, so your favorite, and then Cristiano Ronaldo, 40 at 41 and 36. These are the two captains. For Ronaldo, I think Portugal. He has all the trophies, in his kitty, but this is one, and this one matters the most. The World Cup matters the most. You could have anything, but at this age, they are aiming to win the World Cup. So let's see how it goes. But take some rest. Enjoy the game and keep us posted on the G7 summit. Shubi, thank you so much. Anything else you want to add before we let you go, please?
Thank you. I just want to let everyone know that make sure you have our platform saved. You are watching Channel Y. If you're driving, listen to Radio Y. If you like reading, pick up the midweek newspaper. But most of all, we are updating our social media, Y Media Group's main pages on whether it's TikTok, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Facebook, and whether it's any of our other digital platforms. Make sure if you want minute-to-minute updates, you stay tuned to any of our platforms. We will be giving you all the breaking news that are coming out from the G7 summit here in France.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, Ramona ji, anything else that we want to discuss on?
Yes, I wonder
please.
what you think about what's going to happen with Ukraine. You have Volodymyr Zelensky there, and now it's we all heard President Trump say once when he wins his second term that he's going to finish the war with Russia and Ukraine within the first week. We know that about, what is it, like almost, I think we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. Some estimates are about $500 billion have gone to aid in the last 4 years to Ukraine, and we don't know when this war is going to end. So what do you think is going to happen when it comes to Ukraine and Russia at the G7, or if anything at all?
Yeah, I'll start with the money that has been sent. Of course, the most unfortunate part in any war is the loss of human lives, and that's the casualty we're seeing over here as well. Lots of human lives lost, a lot of people being displaced from their homes. Sometimes, we in media, this is one thing. I don't just look at the numbers. They're not merely numbers for me. This, as you were mentioning earlier, 1.4 million people displaced in Lebanon. Yeah, I've always, felt that. Imagine if someone tells us today, we could move wherever from Canada to US or India to Canada or US to Canada, wherever, by our own will. But if someone comes and you have to leave your homes, and imagine the kind of trauma any families would go through there. And here we're talking millions of people. They have been displaced from their home, whether it was Gaza, whether it's Ukraine, whether even for that matter Russia as well. Many of the areas in Russia, close to the Ukraine border, there were millions of people displaced there as well. So it's not just the tragic loss of human life, but it's also the loss of many families when they would have to leave or abandon their homes, even if it's for a few months or for a few years, and this war has been carrying for so much of time. So that's the first thing. The second thing you just mentioned about aid, and use the umbrella term as aid, but where are these billions of dollars going to? To all those weapon manufacturing companies, in different parts of the world, including US. So we are the Canadian taxpayers' dollars, I'm concerned about that, or for that matter, even the European taxpayer dollars are being spent to, fuel this war. For what? For what? What do we gain out of it? As much as we could say we're defending a democratic nation, yes, we are, but then that's why you're elected as a leader, to make sure that we don't lose as much as we're losing right now, and at least negotiate, get Putin to come on the table. Of course, we could, on the Western side, there is a commentary all the time that yes, we could blame Putin. Yes, there are issues. You cannot attack, and I've been strongly opposed to Russia attacking Ukraine right from day one. I've been opposing that. The other thing I've been clearly opposing is, why are we spending billions of dollars? Where are these billions of dollars going? I'm all for aid. When I talk specifically about aid, send them the medical supplies, send them the food, shelter, or anything. We want to bring the Ukrainians here. Please do so. We need more immigrants here in Canada. Bring the Ukrainians, who are fleeing the war. That's fine. But these billions of dollars, for war, for defending democracy, for defending a fellow democratic country, it's hard for me to comprehend all this, what's going on. And then you're right. I mean, Trump said, not just, he said 24 hours and give or take, or even 24 hours a week, 10 days, 15 days, a month's time. Sir, please, where are we with this war? You've rolled the red carpet for Putin. Nothing has changed. And I doubt, as much as Ukraine security is on the agenda of G7, as much as Ukraine is on the agenda, we have Vladimir Zelensky over there. But then, how can we solve anything? Putin is not part of this. So what are we going to tell Zelensky? What are we going to talk about that? So this is a challenge, this is a challenge in the deal that we were talking earlier as well. Now, US is clearly mentioning, Lebanon is not part of the deal. Why Lebanon is not part of the deal? Because Israel and Lebanon are talking face to face. They've been talking to each other fine. We know they've been talking to each other directly, and they'll be talking to each other directly. But Lebanon is not part of the deal. Fine, then how do you strike this whole peace deal? Because it was mainly an Israeli project, if not a Mossad project, but it was mainly an Israeli project. And then US joined, as you were mentioning this. And here we are trying to figure out Russia and Ukraine war without having Russia on the table. And I clearly remembered, and you know that too, Russia was part of for those who do not know, but I would say just for your benefit, I'm sharing this, but most of you know, Russia was part of the G8. And I clearly remembered when we started calling this as G7 and we let Russia go. I think, and that's why G20, is assuming more of relevance. Why G20 more of a relevance? Because then you have China, you have India, you have Brazil, you have all these countries, part of the G20 summit. G7 is, there was a time, if you just take away US from that, where does G7 even stand for that matter? They're not the biggest economies anymore. They're the richest nations for sure, on terms of per capita, for sure. But then are they the biggest economies? They're not big in terms of geographical area. If you take out US, Canada is, but then in terms of population, in terms of GDP, the power has shifted towards the east. Yeah.
And then for this peace deal between US and Iran that's supposed to be signed, the MOU on Friday, do you foresee anything happening potentially between Israel, Lebanon, Israel? Like, do you see anything that would, I think that's what everyone's waiting to see, if this is going to go through as scheduled or is something going to erupt and, derail, as President Trump has, said a lot of things about Prime Minister of Israel about derailing some of these plans. So do you foresee that happening from now until Friday?
I'll split my money half and half. I think it's a 50-50 chance right now. Anything could happen, there's always a slip between the cup and the lip. So something could happen, something could erupt, Israel or Iran or something could go horribly wrong. But I hope that, they've signed it digitally already. Now they're saying we'll sign it in person. And, there's a bit of a conflicting reports as well. Why? Because one report is suggesting that when they'll sign in person, the MOU, they haven't signed in person. This is a digital signature. Trump has already, he was with the President Macron, when he was talking to the press, and while meeting with President Macron, he said that digitally the deal has been signed, fine. And now, as you were mentioning, let the oil flow and all these things, But then there is another thing there's another report that's coming out that when the deal will be signed personally, the MOU, that is the time the Strait of Hormuz will be fully opened. That's what they're saying. So from that perspective, to answer your question, I think I would assume if that was the case, that the Strait of Hormuz will open fully when this deal is signed personally on Friday. I think President Trump will be pushing, because that is one thing he definitely wants, the Strait of Hormuz to open fully. He's already announced, let the oil flow. The crude oil price has already dropped down to 75, 80 or 85, so 75 to 85, that'll be the price of crude oil. They don't want to jump back again. Yeah, what's your take? What do you think? Will this happen 100% or?
I think there's going to be some escalations that will take place to prevent this, because the part of this is that Israel's saying that they're not going to withdraw from Lebanon, because part of their plan was to have that land. It's about 14% of Lebanon's land. It's from southern Lebanon to the Litani River. And so now would this deal mean that now they have to withdraw and in what they term as a buffer zone or occupation, just withdraw from foreign land, which is Lebanon, which they're saying they don't want to do. So that'll be interesting to see what takes place and what will be the reactions from either side. If something escalates from between Israel and Lebanon, will Iran restrain itself? Will the U.S. restrain itself to see this deal go through, because it means significant things for Iran in terms of, getting some of their frozen assets back, to be able to remove sanctions, to remove the blockade, the U.S. naval blockade on the Iranian ports, which means, they can start trading again, which means more secure ways for the Strait of Hormuz. I think Israel's in a hot seat, because it's not only going to impact its immediate situation with, if something happens with Lebanon, that Israel escalates, for example, because they don't want to withdraw from Lebanon and they don't want to see this peace still take place, which actually legitimizes the Iranian regime, because it puts them in place. They got a better deal than they ever did prior to this war, when it comes to obviously financially, economically, and everything else. But I think then Israel will be in a situation where then the world community will look at them, because this is in China's best interest. 40% of oil comes from the Strait of Hormuz that China relies on. 60% of India's comes from that Strait of Hormuz, 65 from Japan, 75 from South Korea. So here you have a situation where if anything happens during this week where the world is watching these leaders, you have Japan there, you have India there, you have all of them there, Israel would be in a situation where I don't think it would have many nations defending it to sidetrack this deal. So I think the prime minister of Israel finds himself in a sticky situation where, he doesn't want this deal to go through, because then it impedes his objectives for this war and why it even began, and what they've been able to accomplish throughout this war. And at the same time, if they were to go ahead and do something, it would really isolate them even more, not just with, its greatest ally, but with the other countries and also the GCC countries. They don't, like with the Strait of Hormuz being open, imagine you have Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, UAE, all of them get to go through their production levels of producing oil for their shipments, which was all, before it was like hundreds of ships a day past the Strait of Hormuz. It came down to like 34 in weeks. So you can imagine it really impacted their economies, like to the point where Saudi Arabia pulled out of some of its investments that it was going to do in the United States. There was funding that they were going to give to like the New York Opera Society. They withdrew all that funding, because they're like, hey, our economy's been hit. And and here's the thing, even if this deal goes through, the damage it's done for UAE's reputation, the damage it's done for Saudi's reputation, for Qatar, for Kuwait, for Oman, in terms of a place you go to live, and more specifically what Dubai has been for the last, 2 decades now, but more even so in the last decade, of a place where foreigners go, they invest, they open up their, companies there, they open up their offices, there's money flow, there is safety, there's luxury lifestyle. The country's been under an attack for 3 months, right? And so the damage and then what Saudi was going to do with the city, what the linear city it was going to build, and the investments it was going to do in infrastructure to be able to bring those capital over, what it's done in terms of investing in like the Gulf Pro thing, which kind of is falling apart, the investment it was doing in having in the film industry, that's not going so well. I mean, it's now become a danger zone. Like if you had a stopover in the Middle East, you don't want to do that in your vacation plans this summer, because you don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. And last thing you want to do is leave your safe country in the West to go and live in those countries that were promising you access to capital, promising you luxury lifestyle, promising you, a gateway to Asia and a gateway to the Middle East, so to Europe and all of those markets. It's destroyed those efforts. Who feels safe going there as a foreign national, right? To be, when you're like, oh, my country's safer, let me go back to my own country. So, that I think that whole damage that has been done, it's going to take a long time of stability to show us that these are now stable countries to go into and invest. So there's so many other things. So it's very interesting because every little piece matters in this entire, thing that we're looking at in the global economy.
Sure. And I think that's all.
One more question.
Sure.
China is big on this, right? Because you have the president of France who is trying to say, we cannot avoid having a relationship with China. China is very critical. It's growing economy. It's a power player. It's advanced in EVs. It's advanced in AI. And so many different things. And then you have the China One policy on Taiwan. And then not much came out of the US China summit, I would say, in terms of like a remarkable trade agreement, for example. But here you have a situation where, Canada's trade deal with China. It's also second largest trading partner to Canada. So that's significant. But then there's a Taiwan angle, which Canada doesn't seem to stop sending their MPs to Taiwan, which has upset China because of their one China policy. So what do you think is going to happen? Because China is on the agenda.
Yeah, quite a few dynamics, surrounding China. Where do you want to? Okay, starting with Canada. You're right. Canada has been very cautious in restarting the dialogue with China. Why? Because US did comment on that. US, as much as when Canada started its dialogue with India, the trade deal, which I think is almost done. I've said that earlier too. So US didn't comment on that because US is also very actively pursuing a trade deal with India. So, but they would comment on the China thing when Canada started saying things. They said, okay, now just yesterday we were one of your major trading partners, and today you want to go halfway across the globe and start dealing with China out of all the countries. And there have been a lot of eyebrows raised as far as the US is concerned with the China-Canada agreement. The reason US won't talk too much about India because Sergey Gore, the ambassador, has clearly said 99% of the trade deal has been done between India and US, and it's just 1% left. So we are almost in the final phase. And I think Modi and Trump, when they meet, trade will be a very important aspect, the economic. And the central point for this entire bilateral relationship between India and US is the economic aspect. And they want to prop, US wanted to prop and the West wanted to prop India against China. But then, India said, what? China is now India's largest trading partner. China and US, the UAE being the third, but it's always sometimes it's the largest trading partner is US, sometimes it's China, but mostly it's China. And India does need China. China has certain things. China has much more leverage than anybody else. Whether, China has, so that's the bargaining chip China has, it has more leverage in terms of rare earths, or so many other things that China produces, the semiconductors and all those things. India, with due respect, I'm saying India doesn't have any sort of leverage. So India would not want to, and many of the industries in India, they've suggesting the government, we shouldn't be spoiling our relationship with China when, because of the Galwan conflict earlier, when China and India were having issues. So all of them suggested, no, we shouldn't have too much of a conflict with China. Why? Don't, sanction their companies. India did put a lot of sanctions there. TikTok is still banned. Even before US or Canada hasn't banned TikTok for now. There are lots of talks of banning, or US did discuss, but in India, TikTok is banned. Many of the Chinese companies, as much as it's one of the biggest trading partners, and the trade deficit is heavily skewed in favor of China. So India tried to ban, but then the heavy machinery, the sort of, if India really wants to move the economy fast, there's a lot of machinery import and so many things that come from China. I'll come back to Canada once again. Our industry minister, Melanie Joly, I was reading this morning, she's going to talk to her counterpart in China. Maybe we have already allowed 50,000 EVs, to Canada. So maybe we'll see some more investment. That's what our industry minister Melanie Joly will be trying to do. Regarding this whole issue of one Taiwan policy, I think most of the countries, as much as there will be some of the leadership going, Nancy Pelosi, she goes on the plane. What does that accomplish, to Taiwan, or some of our MPs going to Taiwan, or that is fine. But China, at the end of the day, China would definitely, I think, pursue their ambition, yes, the one China policy. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, because China sees it as that you're legitimizing Taiwan.
Yeah.
Taiwan wants to be a sovereign nation. It's not acknowledged so under the UN, the United Nations. And so because of the pressure from China, but China sees that when foreign dignitaries go over to Taiwan, it's solidifying a relationship that's outside of Beijing.
Yeah.
That's why they have a problem with it.
Yeah, you're right. But then at the end of the day, to my earlier point, China knows this very well, that yes,
it's like if Alberta separates, God forbid, tomorrow, and then we have foreign dignitaries going to Alberta and not coming to Ottawa.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I agree with you. That's an irritant for China. Certainly it is an irritant for China. And China wouldn't want, any of the foreign dignitaries visiting Taiwan. And so that is precisely the reason that many of the major countries, including India as well, they haven't really stamped, because they also want to, like India has a good relationship with Taiwan. So they haven't really stamped on the one China policy, but they won't really openly object to it either. So, because, okay, you attend the SCO summit, Modi would want to have, on one hand, oh, here is Putin with me, and here is Xi Jinping, and I'm in the middle, I'm in the center, and, they're thumping their fist. And then, okay, Trump acknowledges, oh, I was watching these three guys there. So he acknowledged. So that's the optics for them. So they won't question the one China policy. But I think the Russia-Ukraine war, with due respect, I'm saying this, if there is any country, because that's a sort of relationship China has with Russia as well, as much as, should I use the term, they're frenemies, So because there's only room for one country to be at the top. Right now, we all know it is US. Like, okay, who became the first trillionaire? Elon Musk, the first trillionaire. So here it is.
South African man who became an American citizen, yes.
American citizen, the first trillionaire on the planet. So very similarly, every country is aspiring to become the first country to hit a $50 trillion economy. So which country that will be, which will be hitting this, milestone of a $50 trillion economy? I think definitely we have China and US in the lead. And so from that perspective, China wouldn't want any more competition from any of the countries, whether a military power or economic power. So China will say, okay, let the war carry on between Russia and Ukraine. How does that bother me? And China and Russia, they have,
It's benefited China in a way where it's buying Russian oil, right, at a discounted rate. And why I think Taipei is very critical here is because it has a great economy and work culture where it's got semiconductors. It produces, Taiwan is #1 place for semiconductors, which is, for AI, for data centers, for all of the defense technology. Like, it's literally for vehicles, it's
electronics,
everything. And so that's why when you have the joint exercise on the Strait of Taiwan, which also is a massive hub for distribution of goods and energy, and then you have the sort of Canada there in its joint operation of just like saying we're here for peacekeeping missions. It's an irritant to China because also China's seeing, this economy that we have trade agreements with Taiwan. Taiwan does trade with the United States. Taiwan's very critical. So they've been very strategic in making themselves very important that you can't avoid them because of what their manufacturing and export capabilities are, and how critical and how strategic they've been in the niche market on semiconductors. But at the same time, you have China's pressure of what's doing. So that's going to be very interesting to watch on terms of where that goes. The other thing is, of course, we want to talk about, take a look at defense spending, which is probably going to be a big portion of the conversations at the G7. And then, of course, AI. So when it comes to defense spending and AI, that we're going to probably hear what's going to, what the latest is going to be with these world leaders and what they're deciding to do.
Yeah, and while we're doing this, we just got the list of the confirmed meeting for our Prime Minister Mark Carney once again. We had this earlier too, but we got this list once again. So we'd like to highlight that. Confirmed bilaterals for Prime Minister Mark Carney. That'll be the Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni from Italy. Then we have the President Vladimir Zelensky from Ukraine. Then from Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed from UAE. Then PM Narendra Modi from India. That's 11:30 a.m. We already broke the news. Then from Korea, we have President Lee Jae-myung. So leaders will be discussing a wide range of topics. That's what we've been told. And there'll be attendance from the leadership of Egypt, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, lots of things expected. Brazil, Egypt, Kenya, Korea, African Bank, and World Bank. So lots of assignments for our Prime Minister Mark Carney in the next 24 hours or so. So we will be bringing you all the live details right here on Y Media Group. Ramona, anything else?
Thank you so much. I think we're all watching to see what will happen between President Trump and Prime Minister Mark Carney, if anything at all. We are 2 weeks away from the Kuzma review that is scheduled on July 1st of 2026. Why is that so critical? Because it's the 6-year mark of the review. If the items are not met in this review and agreed on between the 3 countries, such as the United States, Mexico, and Canada, we go into an annual review, which is not something that is going to be great for our economy or for business investment. And if everything is agreed on, even though the United States is adding new items, then we get to renew this agreement for another 16 years, which means, I think, very significant things for our Canadian economy. So as much as Prime Minister Mark Carney is working to have trade agreements and establish trade routes and everything else he's doing, we still need the Americans. So we're watching for that.
Sure we are. And let me tell you this thing that there are lots of soccer matches also going on. We'll talk about that as well. But on our editor's take, I'll leave you with this question. Ramona ji may will address this next time in the interest of time. That's the discussion happening. You know, will the relationship last between our former Prime Minister Trudeau and Katy Perry? I know you shared a lot of details last time. We did discuss that, you know, on a lighter note, but we will be discussing that probably next time. Will this last or not? There has been a lot of discussion. Our former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he was there to support Katy Perry in US. Why our former Prime Minister wasn't here in Canada to support Canada's men's soccer team on home ground? This was quite historic because we have 48 teams. It's one of the biggest World Cup ever. This planet will witness 48 teams, 104 matches. Canada being the host country, Canada playing a World Cup game right here in Canada, but our former Prime Minister was missing. So there's lots of discussion.
He went on his X feed to say, you know, he had boyfriend duties, but I think he loves the fact that he's in the headlines and we're still talking about him. So we'll just leave it at that.
Okay, that's what I was trying to explain this morning too. I think that's the point. I think many miss here. He was on his boyfriend duties. You know, I think he said, you know, being the Prime Minister, maybe that did take a toll on his relationship. That did take a toll on his marriage. You know, so now he wants to be committed. He's happily playing the second fiddle. You know, cheerleading for Katy Perry. And you know, the way that you see that video on her social media feed where she's just switching on the camera and then she's saying, oh, here we are, and she brings Trudeau and Trudeau comes happily, you know, and then they're taking the picture, then all that. But anyways,
I guess this is all prelude to a reality TV show. I mean, I don't know what to say.
There will be a reality TV show?
No, I'm just saying, you know, like it's like a reality TV show just for the headlines and for clips on social media. Yeah.
We're already witnessed this, aren't we?
In very short form, yes.
In a very short form, you want a full-blown reality TV show?
I don't at all.
You don't want to watch that?
No, I'm happy not to talk about former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, but I think it's definitely feeding the frenzy, and there are many who are talking about that, and you said that's what Trudeau wants. But anyways, that's all the time that we have today. Stay tuned with Y Media. Thank you.